Hi, I'm Jeremy Crosby.
And I'm Nick Boucher. We're the hosts for the program that's all about your city, Talking Fitchburg.
Every day, we pull together the news, events, and information you need to stay on top of what's happening in the city of Fitchburg.
Find Talking Fitchburg on cable TV, Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and our live stream on the web. Plus, you can view all our headlines and stories on Facebook, YouTube, and our video on demand service. This is your city.
Keep up with Talking Fitchburg and the issues that affect you and your neighbors.
Want to know what's happening in your city? Get Notify Me messages from the City of Fitchburg. Visit fitchburgwi.gov on your computer or mobile device and select the big Notify Me button on the left. Enter your email and/or phone number, whichever is best for you to get notifications. Scroll down the list and select all the topics you're interested in to receive email or text messages about. You'll be notified every time one of your topics is updated. Sign up for Notify Me, one more way to keep up with your Fitchburg government.
So we are going to go ahead and call to order the October 2nd meeting of the Healthy Neighborhoods Advisory Committee. And we are going to go ahead and start out with the approval of minutes. We have quorum, so I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
To approve?
Motion.
Motion?
Okay, second?
I second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
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 All right.
This
Cheers. All right.
is Mark Hamilton. I finally got on, guys.
Oh, wonderful.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Mark. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. Okay, we just approved the minutes, so we don't have anybody here for public appearances for non-agenda items, so we'll skip right into the agenda review. This meeting, we're going to talk a little bit about the grant program informational survey, as well as talk a little bit about the Healthy Neighborhood Strategic Plan update. So that's it. So let's go ahead and start out with agenda item A, which is the discussion of Healthy Neighborhoods Grant Program Informational Survey. I guess take it away, Deanna. Or do you want to introduce
I
first?
should,
Maybe
yes.
let's do that first.
We are very happy to welcome Jessica Wolf to the planning team as the new Community Development Program Coordinator. Jessica will be the primary person working with the Healthy Neighborhoods Program and also with the Healthy Neighborhoods Advisory Committee. So we're doing a bit of a transition, but very soon Jessica will be your primary contact through the neighborhood planning, the Healthy Neighborhoods planning process and all those activities. So she has put together some great information this evening, and we'll definitely let her take it away. But maybe, Jessica, you might give a little background and a little info about where you come from.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So hi everybody, I'm Jessica. I'm excited to be here. I've been here for a month now, but I'm originally from Ohio, so I relocated here at the beginning of September. I went to Ohio University where I studied economics and management with a minor in psychology. And then I held some internships while I was in school, so I worked for Pfizer, which everyone around here knows, which is great because typically when I tell people they think of like the pharmaceutical, but since Milwaukee and the Pfizer Forum and everything, people know.
Right.
So I started out with Pfizer and then I went and I worked at a camp, and then my past job was at a foundation where I really found like what I was doing I really enjoyed, and I was doing outreach at that foundation down in Appalachian, Ohio. So working with impoverished or people experiencing poverty in that area. And so while I was doing that, I was looking for my full-time role, and that ended me here, and I'm really happy to be here. So that's a little bit about me. If you have any questions, feel free. I'm happy to talk to any of you and introduce myself more. But that's the gist of my background. Also, I guess like some fun facts are I like to downhill snow ski, I read, and I grew up on a farm. So that gives a little bit more background on who I am. But we can get into the informational survey. So we've created 2 different surveys, and I brought hard copies if you guys would like them. One is for the public and for you guys as well, and this is to kind of gauge or give us more direction on, like Deanna mentioned, like kind of narrowing the scope of the grant allocation process, kind of seeing like where the money is needed and where it's going to impact. These are the questions that we've come up with to give to the public, and if you guys want to review them, I just want to discuss the questions and maybe how we can improve the survey or what you guys, your thoughts are on it. So here's the, I don't know if you guys want a hard copy, you're more than welcome to take one, but I know you have it on your computers.
Actually, I'll take a paper copy.
Yeah.
Always good to have something. My kids use this laptop regularly, and then I have fun with it. So
I'm more of a paper person, so I was like, potentially somebody else is gonna want.
Quick question here.
Yeah, what's up?
In order to get a perspective of the review for this survey, how are the surveys often distributed to the public?
So I was going to use Jeremy, who's our communications person here at the city, to distribute the survey out to the public. I don't know the specifics of how he distributes those, but
I mean, I think I can.
Oh, no, that's a general question to the committee, not to you in particular, Jessica. My apologies. As you are new to the process of the city, so I assume so. That's a general question to the committee in general. If you guys can help me out, I'm also new to the.
I think this is a new process. I don't think we've done surveys before, so I think we being staff, I guess, can distribute it in whatever way I guess you plan on it. But I mean, word of mouth certainly would be nice. I think it would be good to maybe see if we can get the neighborhood navigator to provide that to folks that they come into contact with, because they're going to be dealing with a lot of folks that are going to be on the direct receiving end of some of these funded programs and organizations.
When do we want to have results of the survey back?
Well, we need to move fast because there's what I'm hopeful is that the survey will provide us any information, especially the second part of the survey, for any updates on the application materials or that application process. So actually, we were initially hoping to release the survey very shortly after we get your all feedback here on the committee, and hopefully close the survey within 2 or 3 weeks, and then just kind of see where we are from there. I think there's of course we have a long email list of all of the existing and past applicants that this would go to. We would share this survey, as Jessica mentioned, through our FACTv group, and so through our social media, the city's website. I'm not going to pretend to try to say that this is any sort of scientific survey that is going to touch every single person in the city, but what we were hoping is just to have some additional feedback to help us guide as we make any updates to those application materials and as we go into our 2025 process for the grant application.
Well, we definitely have, we do have email lists through the other listservs that the city has, and there's like 10 gazillion different lists that people have signed up for. So we can probably peruse through there and see which of those email lists might be appropriate to send it off to. It obviously should go on the city's website. I mean, I presume that's how most people are gonna do it. They're not gonna drive to City Hall and fill it out, they'll just do it online. So we should make sure there's an online version too. But we could also, I think, at least two of our HNI neighborhoods, and maybe three, have a JFF office. So that would be one place to distribute it through, because the JFF people have a lot of contact with the residents. And we also need to make sure this is bilingual.
Yeah.
So the intended audience of the survey is community members?
The first part of the survey, general community members. The second part of the survey, past and potential future applicants for the grant program. So there's two pieces here.
Okay. I think just to kind of, as I look over the first part of the survey, I don't know about folks in other neighborhoods, I would say that most of these questions would be extremely difficult for community members to answer. Just in terms of their understanding of, I'm not sure folks have this sort of general understanding of the allocation between neighborhoods. I also think it might be hard for a lot of community members, for example, in my neighborhood in Southdale, to really have a sense for who has more need across the different neighborhoods. So I guess to me it seems like, folks who are really like actively working, in the neighborhoods, but maybe have a broader perspective and understand the grant system and know where the grants were allocated might be able to answer. But I would say the vast majority of residents wouldn't have the information to answer probably any of the questions.
I don't disagree. I think the number of community members who are even really aware of the Healthy Neighborhoods grant program is probably fairly low to begin with. And then when you start asking them questions about how that grant system should work, might be a little challenging for them to really understand unless they're paying a lot of attention. Like you said, if they're intentionally being part of sort of organizations or active in their community to try to pull in resources and work with organizations, then they definitely will have an opinion. So I guess I'm a little bit unsure as to how you would reach specifically those people and really how many of those folks there are.
With that,
go ahead, Sharif.
mind if I chime in? Thank you. With that being said, do we just want to then change the approach of the question for the community rather? So in terms of the language and kind of maybe fine tune exactly what we hope to actually achieve. And that's one of the reasons why I asked how the survey would be distributed, because the survey itself might not have to be a standalone document, and it might be supported with documents that show previous distribution and allocations of grants, previous feedback and comments from different programs and applicants. So that way we're sharing a bit of knowledge in addition to seeking some insight from the community.
Yeah, definitely including some base statistics and general information about the program and its history on the front end of the survey would give people, I think, at least a little bit of context to the questions, so they can refer back to that information and say, okay, for the last 3 years, these are the amounts that were given out, and these were the average number of organizations that received funding. That information. I'm not saying that there needs to be an entire prospectus, because nobody's going to read the entire thing, but a quick fact sheet that's a half a page long that gives some general context might be helpful.
Yeah, So this is Ari. I would wonder what information we're hoping to gather from community members and what we're hoping to do with that information. Because if we're hoping to then conclude which categories we should fund more or which neighborhoods we should fund more, then maybe questions about like what areas of your life need more support would actually be more along the lines of actually getting us information that not only the community members can answer, but also information that can help us. Like, for example, there's this question, which one? 2, I think it is. And it says, rank these activities. Okay, you know, that's good. But what if childcare is something that is, you know, a really high priority for a lot of people? That's not on our list, right? So kind of giving it a little bit more focus as far as like what we're trying to get at in the end.
Sure.
This is Mark. I want to chime in on, I think all the points that the folks on the committee are raising, it's tough being on the phone and not on Zoom, so I can't see people, but I do agree with everything that's been said. Trying to figure out question 2 and even again question 3, without some overview at the front, very short, I think will help get this, get what you want out of it.
But yeah, absolutely. Question 3 needs a map with it. Like, I don't assume that most people would know what those labels of neighborhoods stand for.
I think focusing on questions, like you said, Ari, questions that directly allow the community member to apply their own sort of lens to things rather than asking them to comment on the grant program itself is probably a better approach, only because that's something that they are likely to be more aware of, is, you know, what are the needs of your community, what things are the most important to you in your household and in your neighborhood, that sort of thing. And maybe rather than asking, for example, for question 3, ranking the neighborhoods in highest need of funding, simply knowing which neighborhood each person that's putting an answer in, you know, submitting a survey, knowing which neighborhood they're from gives us an idea of which ones are participating, and then their answers are unique to that particular neighborhood, or at least are, you know, focused in that neighborhood. Because I don't know that somebody, for example, in my neighborhood in Belmar Renaissance on the Park is going to, they're probably going to put their neighborhood first in the priority because that's the neighborhood they live in. So the answer to that question is going to be inherently skewed by where they live, or where people that they know and love or are related to, whatever, live as well. Like if I live in Verona Road West and the rest of my family lives in, you know, North Fish Hatchery Road, those are going to be number 1 and number 2 no matter what, even though logically I might think, well, Southdale needs a lot more resources, but that's not where the people I know live, and I want the resources to go to the people that I'm closest to. So it might be hard to answer that question in a way that gives us information that's truly usable.
I agree on that question. Yeah.
See, I think one of the problems is that, you know, I'm just looking at this survey as it's printed right now. And I've been, you know, kind of, you know, armpit deep in this for several years. Most of the members of the public, like if you're on this committee, but if you weren't on this committee, say one of your neighbors might not even know where Southdale is or have any idea what the kinds of needs there are. So how could somebody in that particular knowledge base be able to properly answer these questions? And to me, to do this survey, just to do it competently, requires a significant amount of background information that most members of the public, even most residents of those communities, aren't going to have. I mean, there's a lot of programs that happen in these communities, but not all of them are funded by HNI. Some of them are just, people are doing what they do, like, the food pantry, one of the food pantries that delivers in Southdale, they aren't doing that because of the HNI grant. They're doing it because that's just what they do. And people who live in those neighborhoods may not know which of the things that are happening are being funded by the grants and which are not. Because that just requires a lot more engagement with government than what a lot of people living in these neighborhoods are working 2 or 3 jobs as it is, and they don't have time to track all the stuff we're doing. Right. So I think without just throwing these questions out there without providing some context may be a bit of a challenge to get useful data back.
Yeah, well, that's why I think that, like, asking the question of, like, what community resources do you use a lot, or do you value, gives them kind of a more open-ended opportunity to say, well, I use food pantries, I use housing assistance, I use child care assistance. Those sorts of answers help us pinpoint and understanding which neighborhood the submittal is coming from lets us know, okay, the people in this neighborhood are utilizing very heavily the food pantry. The people in this neighborhood are utilizing the food pantry, but also are utilizing this service a lot. And so we can kind of pinpoint usage based on neighborhood maybe a little bit more. But again, I don't know how many people are going to submit, like how many data points we're going to have. And that's the other question, is if you don't have very many data points, the data that you gather really doesn't tell that much of a story to begin with. I think this is a good idea. I'm just not sure how many responses we would get. I don't know. So, like, for example, question 6 asks about exactly what we were sort of informally discussing before the meeting started, was talking about awarding a larger number of grants but partially funding the grant applications versus fully funding a smaller number. And I don't know that that's a question that's going to, first of all, be something that the average community member is going to have really any opinion on, but I think it's also highly dependent upon the actual applications that are garnered in any given year. Because I couldn't say, yes, we should fund 13 grants no matter what, because year over year we might get several grant applications where, upon deeper inspection and discussion, they really aren't something we want to, fund. But on the flip side, we may end up with, 5 applicants that are really looking heavily at utilizing the maximum amount of their grant application, and we may say we're going to fully fund all of you rather than 13 of them. So I don't know how easily that one would be answerable either. I know I'm much more excited about the previous applicant and recipients section or portion, because I think in the meetings and in the opportunities that we've had for the grant applicants to come and talk to us about what they do in the community and during the application process. And also last year we had some community organizations, not just applicants, but just generally community organizations come in and speak to us about what they do and what they're seeing in the neighborhoods. And that was extremely useful. So I think this could be an extension of that, to provide them an opportunity to not only have to attend and speak to us, and then we have to try to retain that information, but also we have it on paper as to what they like and dislike about the grant program, what they're seeing in the communities, what the need is, because they live that every day.
Yeah, there's a part of me that does wonder, though, because the organizations that came to us asking for grants the last few years have said they want to do X within this neighborhood. And so does that mean that those organizations are not very familiar with things going on in the other neighborhoods? And so, maybe they can talk, maybe, who was the guy who he was doing kind of a literacy thing up in the North Fish Hatchery area. We gave him a grant this year. Do you remember who that is?
Well, we did Omega School.
Maybe that's the one.
Omega School was for people who want to get their GED.
Yeah, that's the guy. I think that's the guy.
When you said guy, I mean, of course, there's the reading program, but those were a couple of women that did that.
Yeah, I think it was one guy who came in and, but regardless, so I think he was working primarily in the North Fish Hatchery neighborhood. So does he know about what's going on in Southdale? Does he know what's going on in Belmar? Does he know what's going on over in Jamestown? Maybe not. So asking that, I think that's one of the challenges is, in some ways, like a larger organization like the Boys and Girls Club, they're probably aware of things going on in all of these neighborhoods. Even though they don't necessarily have a presence there, they kind of know they get participants from some of those neighborhoods probably. But I don't know what's going on in all of these neighborhoods. I know what's some of the stuff going on in Southdale. I know some of the stuff going on in North Fish Hatchery. I know very little though about what's going on in Belmar, for example, because I just haven't spent much time over there. So I think maybe that might be something to focus on over the next year is how do we get, and maybe that's going to be part of your job.
Yeah.
How do we get people who are experts in what's going on in all of these neighborhoods and can help us make decisions about where we need to put more resources?
There's also resources within the city of Fitchburg who know about this. So for example, Mike Zimmerman, who I think is on, oh goodness, I don't remember. Is he on CETA?
He's our economic development coordinator.
There you go. He knows a lot about different needs of different neighborhoods. And I already reached out to him a while ago and he gave me a really good email, but if anybody else is interested in that kind of information. The JFF workers, they know a lot about needs in different neighborhoods. There's resources I can forward, meeting notes that I've had with like different people if anybody is interested. But
I feel like Ari's suggestion earlier to kind of take a step back and think about what information we want from the survey might be important, because I think that's still, I'm not sure I have that clarity, and one of my questions is, for what purpose do we need to rank neighborhoods from highest need to lowest need? They're all priority neighborhoods, right? There's all significant need in all of those neighborhoods. So I guess I'm just curious about, maybe there is a need for the question, but to kind of take a step back and understand really what is the information, for example, that we want to get from residents, right? And maybe not people who can compare neighborhoods or who know about the grant allocation, but who can speak to their needs and their experiences. That might be one survey. And then, obviously we have the previous applicants survey. But then if there's other, another group of people who we feel can speak to the overall picture of the grant allocation, which I'd be curious, I don't know who that group of people is, I'm sure they exist. But to kind of get to that point of where we know what is the information that we're trying to get from the survey and from whom. And maybe y'all already sort of have that,
Well, like I said, the original impetus was just to provide additional information as we prepare for the next grant cycle, right? So to help us make any changes that might be needed in the application materials, and then to help us as we move towards scoring and selecting applicants. That was our general staff thinking here.
Sure.
That said, that doesn't have to be yours. I mean, we can, there's nothing sacred in the list of questions or anything. And certainly if you want to take it in a different direction, or honestly, if you don't feel that the first survey is just a helpful piece of information, we don't have to do it at all. And if you would just like to proceed with kind of sending out a survey to previous and existing applicants, if that is helpful, that's fine too.
I'm very interested to hear from the general public, as many people as will respond, of course, what they're seeing in their communities as far as a need. I think that's highly important. I don't know that I see a lot of value in asking some of these questions to the general public because they may not have enough context and knowledge. And some of the questions may not be really, again, useful as far as like ranking neighborhoods and things. But more of, providing those data points of what do you see in your community, what are the needs in your community, what resources do you use in your neighborhood, are going to inform our ability to understand which resources are needed and which ones maybe are not utilized as much, and maybe we can generate some folks to show up from the public to speak on that at a meeting in the future. But yeah, I mean, I as it sits, the first one, in my opinion, the first survey doesn't seem like it would be the sort of thing that I'd be comfortable suggesting that we send out without some deeper discussion on what the questions really should be, if any at all. The second one I think is great because it gives us an idea of how easy is the process, how complex. I mean, we've had multiple applicants speak to us about the requirements for reporting for some of the data points are very difficult for them because they serve communities that aren't always going to be forthcoming about as much of their identification as we might want for our data collection. And so I think that may in the future prevent or hinder some groups from applying or successfully completing their programs with the required information because they either legally can't ask certain questions, or even if they ask certain questions, they may not get answers from the people that they serve.
Ari has their hand up, and I know Sharif did earlier too. I don't know if he still wants to speak.
Yeah, I did. Still here. Enjoying the conversation. First and foremost, I would like to say thank you, by the way, very much for putting this first survey together. I think in as much as we did not hit the mark as to what we hope to achieve with this survey, I think the idea and the concept is beautiful. I think getting feedback from the community and as well as previous applicants is exactly what we need to be able to do our job the right way. So thank you very much for that initiative. It appears from reviewing the survey yet again and based on this conversation that we've had that the questions that are being posed seem like questions that are for the committee or what we hope to drive away from the survey, and not necessarily the questions that are to be facing the clients or the committee and the community in this case. So I think we kind of already have driven home the message here. I'm not sure if you have other questions for us as to what type of question we want, and maybe we can brainstorm that and then share that with you to give you a better direction as to how those surveys should be, categorized. So, can you guys hear me well? Because I'm getting a lot of feedback.
Yeah.
No, we hear you fine.
All right, perfect. So I think the idea is pretty much, what do you need from us to help you get a better perspective as to what type of question we believe we should direct to the community? And I think that way we can kind of get in a direction, know exactly what we need to do and where we want to go. And that way we can come together with a solution.
Agreed. I think that might be a good action for us all to take are we going to meet again this year? I forget if we have another.
I am planning, I think we shall. Either November or December, but maybe it'll be December.
We're funded for 8 meetings or 10?
We can do
Eight.
We can do a follow-up email to this call and just reply to you. So if you can, we can do that before the next meeting. Actually, we can just do that as a post interim to this meeting, and provide different suggested questions that we think would be most ideal, and then we can communicate back to us based on that information that we share.
Sure. I mean, I think.
I actually just mocked up something that I was thinking about. I mean, I don't know if we can just like real briefly take a look at it. But, Healthy Neighborhood Advisory Public Survey, a quick little, we are the Healthy Neighborhood Advisory Committee, and we have many initiatives, but one of them is this grant program, and we want feedback. In which neighborhood do you live? With a map, and then you select. We want to understand your local needs. So here are examples of community resources. What community resources do you use and value? What community resources don't exist but would be helpful? Anything else you want to tell us? So that's just a really brief example of a 4-question survey that I feel like could be something that a resident could fill out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That looks fantastic.
I like that. I mean, I was just thinking something almost along the identical lines. I'm going to have to leave pretty soon because I have a neighborhood meeting that started at 6 that I'm sure is going to be quite chaotic. So I have to run off to that. But I think the way to do this community, the public survey, is to say we have the Healthy Neighborhoods Initiative that involves funding different nonprofits to provide certain types of programs in your neighborhoods. In 2024, here's the things that we funded. And I would want to ask, did you participate in any of these things? Did you go to one of the food pantry deliveries? Did you go to the GED thing? Did you participate in any of these? If so, which ones? And then ask, I think we should ask, one of the things that's lacking in our current process is asking the participants in these programs how they feel these programs are serving their needs. So we're getting an evaluation from the providers, but we don't really know from the participants whether it's meeting their needs or not. So I think that would be something important that I'd want to ask. I'd also want to, I do like the idea of asking what things are we not providing that would be helpful, because then maybe we can go out and try to solicit programs, nonprofits that would provide those programs. I think, I don't want to make it a 20-page survey. So I think the idea of keeping it short, maybe 5, 6, 7 questions at the most, and providing some of that background material that they would need. They need to know the city of Fitchburg has funded this. This is what we are doing to try to help you. Because I think it's important. I do think it's important, especially in these neighborhoods, for people to have the sense that government is not just there to make their lives more difficult, but that we are trying to do some things to meet the needs that exist there that we know about. But also recognizing that we don't know about every need, because, even if you live in the neighborhood, you might not know, because there's, everybody's got different circumstances. So, and with that, I'm going to take off.
Okay. Well,
thank you very much, Jay.
Ari, is that something that you could send a link to all of us to take a look at? Or
Yeah.
That would be fantastic. Because I really like how that was laid out, because it's very, very fast, and I think you could complete that and maybe a couple other questions in 10 or 15 minutes of your time, so you're not spending a really long time trying to find information or whatever is just off the top of your head, where do you live, what things are you seeing in your community, what things would you like to see supported, and thank you very much, boom, done. I really appreciate that. Yeah.
Awesome work, Ari. I really liked it as well. That was dope. And that was quick too. That was really quick.
Impressive. And she did that just while sitting here in this meeting.
I concur with your plan. It makes sense.
So yeah, maybe we kind of take a little bit of homework away from us this meeting and just kind of think to yourself and take a look at what Ari is going to share with us, and if we have any ideas of other questions we think might be helpful or anything else, maybe by this time next week, provide that to staff would be helpful. I'm going to have some time this weekend, so I'm definitely going to look at both this more in depth and what Ari shared and really think about it. So I'll have something. Do we have any other discussion about this, or do we want to move on to the next item in the agenda?
I think we're good to move forward.
Okay.
Could I just put something out there, actually? This may not be related, but I do want to say something that, after maybe about a year on the committee, I think that one of the difficulties is identifying the service providers. I think there is data on what people need is always really important, and I think I really found that it was difficult to find what are the service providers who could apply for these grants and could really reach our neighborhoods in ways that they haven't been. And so I think that would be just another area to really boost our own awareness of, to be able to be reaching out to more service providers and kind of deepen their support for our neighborhoods.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's move on to the next item in the agenda, item B. So discussion of the strategic plan update.
So for this, we were thinking about 3 things for the update, kind of looking at defining the scope of the update, community feedback and engagement and data. So I have a couple questions on each that we could maybe start us off with the discussion. In terms of defining the scope, something that we're looking at is, are the key goals of the original plan still relevant given the current neighborhood dynamics? What's working in the plan and what's not working? For some background, the definition of the healthy neighborhoods right now in the current document is equity, diversity, and components that are integrated, stable, and sustainable: education, employment, housing, recreation, public safety, environment, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the scope is too broad or not broad enough, really. I mean, I think that covers most of it. One thing that Ari, you had mentioned was childcare, and I don't know if that's covered by the current scope. But I think it's a valuable item to include in our intention for the plan, is to make sure that we care for folks in that regard as well. I know post-pandemic that's been a big issue, given state funding for providers is drying up at a fairly rapid pace.
I've got a general question. I know that childcare has come up a couple of times. Do you think that this grant program is suitable for providing funds specifically for childcare? When we say childcare, what would that look like in terms of funding?
That's a good question.
So, I would love to see the respite center create a location here in Fitchburg, and that could provide emergency childcare services to any families that need it, just as they do in the northeast Madison area that they currently live in, and then we, as the city of Fitchburg, could help support their efforts. Just an idea.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, my family has used that respite center at times in the past, and it is definitely a resource that would be incredibly helpful, I think, for lots of people in the community. I guess the question from the grant program perspective is really, is it intended for targeted specific organizations with specific projects that they want to tackle, or is it considered an ongoing program to help support ongoing programming? And I think that's a conversation that we've had several times in the past. Is kind of hard to juggle, right? Because on one hand, you want to use any available resource to support any program that's going to help the community, but at the same time, if it's going to be a year-over-year funding thing, it may be better to bring that up at a city council level for more regular budget funding versus waiting on an application every year for the grant program. I think there's some overlap there, certainly. I know, like the senior centers, their transit to get seniors to and from the senior center is a thing that, on one side, you should be funding that all the time, and that could be a regular part of operations. But also, if you're trying to expand the reach of that program, for example, a one-year grant might help you do that, and then provide that data that proves that it's a valuable resource that deserves more regular funding, and then you could go to the council or to really anybody else who's more suited to a regular ongoing funding model to say, we got this grant this year, it did a really great job, it boosted our attendance by X amount, provided resources for the community, and now we want to have that be a regular part of our organization. And so I think it could be an onboarding operation in terms of that. So if the respite center says, we're going to locate here and we are going to do this trial program and we need some grant funding to get it off the ground, we want to provide families with this resource, and we're going to do it this year, and we're going to show that it's really, really successful. And then the next year they go to the city council and they say, we would love for you to provide us with a more sustainable source of regular funding to help keep this thing a more ongoing program. I like that idea a lot. It's the question is, how do you work that method into a program that sort of allows anybody to apply, so long as they put forth all the applications? Because we've definitely had organizations that have applied every year for essentially the same amount and for very similar programs year over year. And their services certainly are useful and necessary, but I personally question then, are there other organizations or groups that might be trying to do more targeted things that are not able to get funding, or who don't see an opening for them to start out because the grant money is being given regularly to a certain organization? And I know we did have a little bit more information this year as to each applicant knowing how many times they had applied in the past, or information about past grant recipient information. So that was definitely helpful in terms of trying to determine who and what to fund. But yeah, you raise a good question, Deanna. Is it the right mode of funding? I think it really depends on how the grant application is put forward. If, like I said, if they're saying, we want to do this and we want to prove that it's useful, that to me says you're utilizing the funds in the way that's intended, at least that I understand that the grant program is supposed to be implemented, is that you're going to do a specific targeted program for the community rather than use it for ongoing expenses, which I like.
Maybe this committee could look at expanding its scope beyond just the grant program. Perhaps we could have a subcommittee to make recommendations or have ideas, or, you know, to like look through our the document that we have that defines our scope, and, you know, make recommendations as to other initiatives or other ways to modify that document. That would be pretty cool.
Yeah, I think, you know, the intention for this process, and we probably should have opened up, the H&I strategic plan was technically a 5-year initiative here, and the mayor has been pushing us to staff to do an update, right? And so this is a process where we envision a process, a public process to do this update, working very closely with the committee to do this update. And then the intention would be we would take this document to council for adoption, right? So that would be our new document to guide the committee's activities in the future, Jessica, myself, staff, in terms of the healthy neighborhoods. Does that kind of make sense?
What's the timeline?
Well, the mayor wanted it done 6 months ago.
Yeah.
So I've kind of in my head said, you know, we need to kind of think about a 6-month timeline. I think is pretty reasonable. And there's not a set timeline, but we'll have to work together as a team to move through that process.
I will say between now and the beginning of the year is probably going to be the best time for us all, not anybody's personal schedule, obviously, but just generally speaking for the committee, because starting in January, we really start talking about the grant program, we start doing applications, we start reviewing things, and then so between January and May, we're focused all in on that, and so that eats away at our ability to really look at the strategic plan, right? And the summer months are the summer months. We get together, we can talk about stuff, but people have summer stuff going on, and so it's more difficult to really dig into the meat of a document, right? So the fall months, you know, get yourself a nice hot cup of coffee or use some tea, light a candle, sit on your porch, and you know, do some deep diving in and write down some thoughts. I think that would be my approach personally. To just kind of slog through the important information that's in the plan. But I definitely think it would behoove the committee to take a look at, or to try to take a look at the plan, at least in a cursory level, before the next meeting, and have a more in-depth discussion of the topics inside the plan and kind of what areas we want to look at for updating most critically. Because there's probably entire sections that likely won't need more than a light touch to update, but there are probably several sections that moving from a pilot program into a more fully fledged you know, ongoing effort may need significant revision to address, you know, new things that we want to make sure that we're covering, and also wipe out stuff that either no longer applies or is, you know, maybe outside of a scope that we want to target more specifically. So that said, I guess, you know, maybe that's on the agenda for the next meeting that we do, is we can have that talk, and we should all take a look at that plan and plan to discuss that more in depth next meeting.
Sure, I think that's great.
Are you talking
Hey, Ryan?
about the city's strategic plan, or are you talking about the Healthy Neighborhood Advisory Committee's strategic plan?
We're talking about the Healthy Neighborhoods Initiative strategic plan.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you're right, the city's doing a strategic plan that is beyond the scope of Jessica and I.
Absolutely.
Strategic plan, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, got a little confused.
This is referring to that specific document that Healthy Neighborhoods did in 2019. And so we're looking at updating that document.
Sure. Mark, did you have a comment?
No, I was just going to raise the same question. Which document were you referring to? So, again, the quicker you get us the follow-up assignments out, Ryan, the better off we're going to be.
I'm wondering, so would love to just spend some more time with this document before the next meeting. Jessica, you had some like specific areas that seemed like you thought would be useful to be like considering, I think. Do you want to talk us?
Yeah, so while you guys were like talking through this survey, I think, and you guys made incredible points, I want to say, by the way, like I really appreciate the feedback because I was sitting here and I was like, of course, like I should have been thinking. But I think with this, I was looking more at the strategic plan and trying to get a grasp of how it should look with the update. And so right now, the like priorities of the strategic plan kind of align with this youth development, adult education / workforce development, food security, and neighborhood / community building and engagement. I'm trying to understand if these are still relevant for the city and if these should be updated, maybe what that would look like with childcare or making sure that these should be our focus areas. Because if you get into the current initiative, it kind of starts with like these big, the broad sense, the big focus areas, and then it breaks it down into pillars, and then it breaks it down into action items and more goals. And with the update, I feel like it would be beneficial to narrow these down a little bit more so then it's not as broad and we are really focusing in to meet the goals that we've set. But I feel like initially we need to understand what those needs are. And so that's why we felt like starting with the survey to the public would be really beneficial for updating the plan.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I think the challenge in my mind is narrowing the scope of the plan is narrowing the scope of any effort is always difficult when you're trying to serve the community because the need is almost always greater than what you have. And so saying we're going to cut things out of the scope of this committee is sort of painful to think about because it's like, well, almost all of the things that you listed in there are things that I think every community struggles with to certain degrees. And I personally, when I think of all the priority neighborhoods, I can't think of a single one of those items that is in 5 years not still a priority.
Question: Is there a need for this? Where's the axe? Is there a need for the condensation of the scope? Is there a need for that? Where's the axe coming from in particular? Or is that just the question that was posed to the committee? If that's the case, then I guess we can answer that relatively quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an option or a question that's out there is, is the scope appropriate? Not so much does it need to be shrunk or grown, but just when we look at the existing scope in the document, does that match the current atmosphere and the current reality? And I think if again, in my opinion, I think if anything, it could be broadened more than that.
Yeah, in that case, I concur with your evaluation then. Yeah. No additional comments.
At narrowing it because the city's a municipality, so there's only so much that the city can do. And so we want to make sure that the city, instead, I understand that there's trust me, with working in a foundation, there's a need everywhere for everything. But narrowing it would allow us to focus in on the resources that we do have and what can we have an impact with those resources. Where with right now, the plan's very broad, and so the resources could go a lot of places, but the impacts might not be as large or sustainable. So we want to make sure that the city, with the resources that we're allocating, we're making an impact and having sustainable change. So in the future, it's really uplifting these communities in a meaningful way. But I don't want to, it's not taking away from the fact that all of these things are needed. It's more, we recognize that there's a lot of needs, but we want to make sure that we're hitting and having a meaningful change on some needs that the city can provide resources for, because unfortunately there's not unlimited resources to hit all of the needs.
It's sort of another form of the same question of, do we fund fewer grant recipients to a larger extent, or do we fund more recipients to a lower level sort of question? And it's kind of another version of that question, really, because the amount of money in the bucket isn't necessarily going to change. It's how do we allocate those funds? How do we focus those? And I think everyone's going to have maybe different opinions on that, for sure, because you may really want to address food insecurity as a primary issue, and so you could say, well, we're going to narrow the scope down to that. But then you could also say, well, doing that doesn't provide a certain base level of services across the board for certain things.
Right.
And you may lose entire support for an entire portion of our previous scope if we don't provide some sort of grant funding. And so if we pull back from that portion of the scope, then there may be nobody in a certain neighborhood providing funding for groups that provide that service. It's a tough discussion for sure.
Yeah, it'll be a challenging update, but the initiative, it's not like once it's updated, it's set in stone and we can't change things. It can be continuous. I was just looking at, I feel like starting with data from the community and kind of collecting that feedback, if there's a large need for food, looking at, okay, maybe we focus more on places who are offering resources for food. If we see that that's the strongest need, if they're like, I need childcare, we look into childcare. But for me, if the scope is broad, it's going to be hard for the city to focus on maybe where the need is. And so I feel like collecting data will help with that. And so that's the purpose of the surveys. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that my initial thought is employment assistance, because if we provide these families with opportunities to really get good, livable wage jobs, then, hopefully they can have a lot of their own needs met in other ways. I mean, we're definitely, that's not going to eliminate the need for additional housing security support and food security support. But if I have to choose a area of focus, personally, I would say employment opportunities, and making sure that everybody has an opportunity to actually get to work and stay employed. And yeah.
I guess the question, for me, it becomes a bit of a chicken or egg question, particularly when it comes to job services and access to food and or childcare, right? Because if you don't have access to food and you don't have access to childcare, it makes it awfully difficult to get a job. Because you may not have the childcare that enables you to go and work while you're working. But on the flip side, if you don't have a job, you may not be able to pay for childcare in order to get yourself a job. And so it's like this cycle that is self-sustaining, which is a challenge. And I don't know how you focus on one without focusing on the other. But
I think you make a great point. Like if you focus on one, how can you not focus on the other? But I also feel like they're kind of like a percolating effect almost of like, okay, this aspect of my life is improving, so I can work on this. Again, I could be totally incorrect about that, but I feel like it could potentially have that spreading out effect.
Sure.
If there was sustainable support in a couple specific areas.
The issues are absolutely intersectional, right? They overlap each other, and each one affects the other. And I don't know. I don't know that I have any other comments without really deep diving into the thing, because otherwise I'm just kind of going off of what I think and not what the plan actually states. And I think that would be more helpful, is to really look at what the plan states and take a look at what we might want to change based on what it currently says. Because otherwise we would end up writing this whole thing from scratch via discussion here. So,
I think Sharif was
Sharif, did you have another comment?
Yeah, I was just kind of still in line with what you're saying, but it's important to remind ourselves that we serve a very diverse community with a vast varieties of need, and our job here is to make sure we capture as much of those needs as possible, in as much as we have a very little amount of purse to work from. So I don't think this is the forum to discuss this plan or amendment, or I don't think this is the time for that conversation. And I feel like, the input that we've provided should be sufficient enough to gather additional information and discuss this further later on, if needed.
Agreed. Yeah, we can do a more deep dive next meeting, and with a little bit more preparation to talk about the individual sections. And we can bring up the plan itself and walk through it more directly, for sure. Okay, I think we can move along in the agenda for now. We'll go back to that at the next meeting. So yeah, everybody take a homework direction to maybe take a look at that strategic plan and edify yourself as to what it looks like, and maybe write down some comments so we can discuss it next meeting. Okay, so let's move on to the next agenda item. Report from department.
Okay, I'll jump in on this one today.
Okay.
Just a quick update on the hub, under construction, really excited. So things are moving along out there. We're on track to finish up, next year, probably in the summer or in the later summer. Right now is what we're on track for. So the hub is coming along. The Teen Center Phase 2 feasibility study is nearing our closure. So we hope to have a final document in approximately a month and a half. And FYI, the design team led by Annette with EQT will be presenting at the Committee of the Whole on November 20th. So that's, we'll send out a meeting notice too. So she will be presenting to Council at the Committee of the Whole the results of that feasibility study. So should be some real interesting information in that. That will be coming up. We are in the midst of budget for 2025. And actually the budget meetings are going on right now. And right now, just confirmed today what we're looking for right now in the budget for the grant program. We have $83,000 set aside right now for 2025. So that's going to be quite a bit less than what we were working with last year. We were over 130,000 for a couple of different reasons. That is a little bit unusual. The amount that we have this year is more like our standard amount. So just wanted to let you know that. And then also,
Question real quick.
yeah.
Is there a particular reason why the amount for last year was unusual, as you just disclosed?
Yeah, there was. One of the pieces was that we had unspent funds from a couple of years in the past that we were able to roll over. So there was probably close to 300,000 in some unspent funds. And then the mayor was able to find a little bit of extra funds, unusually so, last year for 2024.
Thanks for that clarification.
Of course. So that's all I have.
Okay.
Unless there's other questions.
I know this is not officially part of our committee, but any word on the Southdale Park? Do you have any?
Oh, yes. So the plans are moving forward. Actually, I did just speak briefly to the Parks Director today about that. He said it's going. And so they're working on just identifying the funding sources for that. It's always a tricky thing to identify funding sources, but the process is continuing and the plans are continuing, so it's going to happen. I just don't have a specific timeline right now.
Thank you.
Of course, yeah.
All right. Excellent. Okay. Next item is announcements. Does anybody else have any announcements? I guess kind of an announcement, really more of a request. Just as we continue along with these meetings, as the meeting invites are sent to you, if you know you're not going to be able to make it to a meeting, it would be really, really appreciated if you could send out an email to either staff and myself, so that way there's a little bit of awareness of folks that aren't going to be able to attend. It happens, especially, I mean, if there's holidays or personal things or work stuff. It happens, but there have been a few times this year where we've had meetings that we've started without a quorum because we weren't sure who was going to show up. And that makes it a little bit difficult to know if we can start the meeting or not, and if we are going to have to run the meeting without a quorum, so we can't make any decisions or anything. So just much appreciated if you can give a heads up ahead of time to let folks know if you are not able to attend. Very much appreciated. Other than that, if there's no other announcements, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I will make that motion from Minneapolis. I got to go to grandkid duty.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark. Motion seconded. Anyone?
Second.
I'll second. That's Sharif does it.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. Meeting is adjourned.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
By the way,